Well, good evening. Thank you. Just because I've got this accent does not mean that I know anything technically about the game of football, okay? I've played it, of course, all through my younger years, all the way through to university, but not on the first 11. I was on like the fifth 11, and that was only on Wednesday afternoons when everyone else had gone. So I like to think of myself definitely as a friend of Canadian, I'm going to say soccer. But more importantly, I am a friend of Ontario soccer. And as a friend, one of the aspects of being a true friend is to tell you stuff at times that might make you go a little bit, why is he saying this? Is he attacking us? I'm not attacking you, but I need you to understand where I'm coming from. Without being too big-headed, I have a wealth of experience of sport across the planet, many different sports, many different countries, certainly grassroots to high performance, although I've tended to make my living out of the sharp end, where things get really very serious, so typically from the ages of 21, 22, 23 and above, where the people are at their best, typically. I have a great affinity for grassroots and the journey towards that. The other thing, I'm going to throw out some very general comments at you deliberately. One of them was this: you are in a game of mass participation. The uniqueness of soccer is unassailable by most other activities. Both genders, doesn't really take a lot of equipment to play the game. Everyone has a reasonable understanding of the range of capability and skill level, and is played across the entire planet. This summer, we will see the pinnacle of that game played. We will see viewing figures that make most other sporting events look very second-rate. But with that comes a huge penetration to a number of different areas. The imagination of children of the future growing into adults that will lead us, into the mindset of politicians that can make policy decisions. But above all, sport at its best and finest in bringing humanity together. There's very few sports that do that. The Winter Games that have just passed did it as a collective of different activities, not a single sport. And there were very fine examples of people behaving badly and cheating. In soccer, we must rail against that type of behavior. But understand that perhaps the only other sport that challenges it, and even then it's much more expensive, requires very specific facilities, plus relatively expensive equipment, and that is golf. Cradle to grave, both genders played across the planet, but not to the same extent as football. It's remarkable, the beautiful game. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the need for a broad approach to long-term player development, long-term participant development. Most athlete development frameworks are really participant frameworks, from which at certain stages you overlay programs to do with performance orientation. The issue is, often people rush those. I've told you before, 2 years ago, 85 to 96% of age group champions are not the people that win at the senior level. I don't care, for the most part, about the 12-year-old and 14-year-old and 16-year-olds as being champions. I'm more importantly concerned about how they develop. Are they having fun? And the biggest metric that you all need to understand in terms of a lead metric is what percentage of the youngsters that start out with Ontario soccer are at least still playing soccer as they leave high school. That has to be a fundamental metric for you. But everyone focuses on the lag metrics, the things way down the road. Winning the World Cup, winning an Olympic medal, getting to the NHL, getting to the NFL, whatever it might be. Forgetting the actual process or the journey in between. You know, here's a damning statistic. I deal with hockey. my very first day on the job, 1995, with Tom Rennie and Mike Johnston of the In Residence program. When I arrived in Canada in 1990, the percentage composition of the NHL was well over 96-97% Canadian. This year, for the first time ever, we dipped below 50%. If we were running Coca-Cola or PepsiCo, and we were boards of directors, and we took our market share from 96% to 50% in a quarter of a century, we would be fired. And why has that happened? They face exactly the same challenges you do. Stupid competition structure. Listen, it doesn't take any technical expertise to develop a competition calendar. My mum could do it, okay? She's 86, tell her a little bit about Ontario, the structure. She could design the competition structure. Tells you nothing about the technical competency of the program, of what you're actually teaching and exposing these youngsters to, year after year after year after year. Then we put our children in the hands of people who aren't that well qualified, don't have that much experience, aren't prepared to have a mindset of continual learning. And I'm going to come at you very hard in a few minutes on that particular message. So let's get started. My job is to make you think. I use this slide a lot. It's not meant to be a smooth journey. Throw the rock in the pond, cause the ripples. I don't care whether you like me. I don't care whether you agree with me. But as long as I make you walk out of here and think, and where possible, think about what you can do with your life to have greater impact on these youngsters, or whatever you're directly responsible for. That's my job. I want you to become questioners. Why do we do this? How are we going to improve on last year, this year? Why? And I hope you've all read Simon Sinek's book, Why, where he takes you through the journey from why to how to what. A phenomenal book. We should all read it and understand what it actually means. So I've got 3 sections to talk to you tonight. Some generalities. We're going to talk a little bit about age appropriateness, and then we're going to talk about the world outside your door. Because one of the problems with a sport organization and a community is you're not working in isolation. Most of you are dealing with your clientele who are in Canadian academia. From elementary school, at least to the end of high school, some into university. That is the biggest determinant of their timetable. Not you, school. Don't fight it. Understand that when they go through exams, this is a major stressor for them. I, as a physiologist, that's what my PhD's in, will tell you what happens to them biochemically, what happens to the immune system. Well, what happens if immediately after an exam period, when they're going on vacation, you decide to do a training camp, right within the first 48 to 72 hours after that exam period? A recipe for disaster. They're in the pit of despair. I can guarantee a number of things will happen. They will either get sick or injured or both under those circumstances. Don't believe me? Ton of research in that area. Tons. So understand that you're never in isolation, and I'm going to show you some examples from other sports around the world of what they're doing in similar areas to you. So let's deal with some generalities. Things change. You know, when I was a kid, when I was a nipper back in England, this was the epitome of personal electronics. Less than 30 years later, we're faced with the Apple iPhone X. Well, the one on the left, although this is the one with the microphone and the orange button, it actually does 2 things. You could actually do a garbled recording, but the basic bog standard Walkman could only play a cassette tape, and it didn't do it very well, because if you actually put a 90-minute cassette in, when it was running off 2 AA batteries, it would start off like this, because it's straining, until it got to the middle of the tape, and then it would be recognizable music. But that's all it could do. Whereas the device on the right, you can have the entire music library of all of us here on that thing. It plays it in digital quality sound. You can phone your friend. You can surf the net. God, you could talk to someone on the space station if you wanted to. All in the space of 30 years. So the key thing that you need to understand is this construct of change, of sport being highly dynamic, of generations after generations of evolution. That's the mindset you've got to be in. Why are we in a pickle in Canada? Because we allowed ourselves to do nothing for half a century, despite all the evidence around what is the best thing to do with children. And so all of a sudden now we have to make a quantum leap of change, and everyone hates change. We don't get that if we had just taken baby steps, a gradual evolution, a gradual kaizen, continual improvement, we wouldn't have all the fuss that we're having. All the naysayers, all the people that don't like the Band-Aid ripped off because they've got to move, makes you uncomfortable, takes us out of our comfort zone. It's pathetic behavior, really. Because ultimately you have to ask yourself why you do things. And what can you do if you really had no limits? Well, here's an example from the Second World War. So, after Dunkirk, and if you saw the film recently, you'd realize that the Allied forces were stranded on that little island of the United Kingdom. And the only way to keep the United Kingdom alive was by the merchant vessels coming from largely the east coast of North America, coming out of Halifax, Boston, New York. The only problem is the Germans had an incredibly astute tactical advantage. They had built lots of cheap submarines called U-boats, and they didn't go out and hunt one at a time. They sent them out in packs, so that when they found a convoy of boats coming from Canada to provide munitions, foods, armaments, medical supplies to the United Kingdom, they could absolutely decimate that convoy. Why sink one when you can sink 20? And they were being very, very effective. Now, one of the problems to counter that, the Allies at the time didn't have a sophisticated sonar readily available. So one of the strategies they came up with, while we design systems to combat the Germans or steal some of the technology, which they did, could they replace the ships that were being sunk faster than they were being sunk? Well, they came up with this design. They got all the real thinkers in a room, all the people that actually could design the ships, the people that actually built the ships, the people that outfitted the ships. They came up with these two designs, the Liberty and the Victory design. Now, the problem was, in 1944, the average build time for one of those was 42 days. 42 days. Well, in 1942, the build time had been 6 months. And they took it to 40 days just by organizing around the purpose of doing the right thing in a better way. How do we actually design the boat to be built quicker, then actually build it quicker, and then implement it? 42 days from 6 months. And we're worrying about how we implement a long-term player development strategy. No one's trying to kill us. We're just trying to do the best thing with the best information possible for the best interests of the children and youth we're dealing with. Pretty good to me. I'd give you a Nobel Prize for that. More importantly, the Robert G. Peary that was launched actually in 1942 in Southern California was built in 4 days and 15 hours. A boat that was previously built in 6 months, an average of, by 1944, after a bit of practice, 42 days. And this one, 4 days and 15 hours. We have the ability to do anything we like. Anything. If you put your mind to it and you keep your mind open. As soon as you don't do that, as soon as you start saying, but, or as soon as you start saying, well, this is the way we do things around here, or this is the way it's always been done, you're lost. And in sport, basically that means someone else comes straight past you. So do you want to be a follower or do you want to be a leader? And if you're not a leader, at least be the first adopter and bring everyone else along with you. Here's another view of looking at the world of change and improvement. So here's up until very recently, this was the lowest steering wheel on the Jeep range of vehicles. Instantly recognizable. Everyone knows, even if they don't drive. Sorry, let me go back. Instantly recognizable as a steering wheel. It has a number of features on it. Has some stalks, has a horn, has an airbag, does all the basic things. But it's not particularly sophisticated. It hasn't got a lot of feel to it, coupled with this chassis on the basic one. So here's a more sophisticated one. Obviously the price point goes up, but now this steering wheel, because this particular manufacturer also knows that the less time you have two hands on the wheel, the greater the likelihood of having an unfortunate event in that car, namely hitting something or going off the road. So now we see around that steering wheel, you can see it's actually designed ergonomically for where the hands should actually fit. It has a number of controls right within the thumb reach. It has paddle shifters to change gear, so you don't have to reach for a gear shifting slot. You can control the radio, you control a number of the computer onboard diagnostics. Pretty good. But what if you needed to be better? Are you going to just accept that and let someone else come past you? Well, someone did. Price point goes up, of course. So here's a steering wheel for the next car, a Ferrari. Now, this Ferrari has a performance envelope way in excess of that Audi TT. Even more dire if you lose control with only one hand on the wheel on this thing. So on this one, you can start the engine, you can change the suspension, you can actually turn the lights on, the windscreen wipers, the big paddle shifters, and just to the left and right of the paddle shifters, you'll see the insignia of the horn. You just have to flick your thumb and press for the horn. You can change the onboard diagnostics, all from the steering wheel. And just when you thought that was world leading, then you have to take it to the true pinnacle. So this was the steering wheel of last year's Lotus Renault. 36 different functions. The driver could even press a button and get a squirt of Gatorade into his mouth through his onboard helmet feeding system. He can even change the distance electronically on the clutch travel, depending on the distance between where he is on the grid and the dive into the first corner. Change it, all from the steering wheel. He can open up a little slot on his rear airfoil so that if he is within 1 second of the car in front on a particular part of the course, a little green light comes up telling him from the onboard radar that he's within 1 second. He opens up a little slot which admittedly loses downforce, but he gets much faster in a straight line. Gives him enough, maybe in the region of 15 to 20 horsepower to zip past under overtaking and braking in particular for the next corner. That's the way people think. So what's the equivalent for you? Do you really think, do you watch a practice and think, how much more time on task and have fun could I have with this group of 15-year-olds? This drill that I'm trying to do, how useful is that? I mean, I watch hockey quite a bit these days, and I'm amazed how much time people do drills through the neutral zone. You ever watched a game of hockey? The puck's there maybe a few seconds out of the entire 60 minutes, and yet you'll see them practice drill after drill through the neutral zone. Puck's there for hours. Never happens in a game, but no one asks why. Why are we doing this? Because they've done this drill since the beginning of time. And one of the worst traits is to coach the way you were coached. So we have to hit the hazard warning light every so often. People are going to take pot shotters. I guarantee some of you may even be the people taking pot shots. We'll have a chat about that afterwards. But I guarantee every time you want to change something, this happens to you. So now you have to understand this. Assholes. And there's a very fine book written by Professor Sutton at the Harvard Business Schools called The No Asshole Rule. Don't believe me? Here it is. The No Asshole Rules. And sport is littered with assholes. Athletes, parents, administrators, coaches, sponsors, interviewers. They're all there. They're all there, and they create a culture that doesn't help. There's a little checklist of the type of things that correspond to this. The people that make personal insults, people that invade your territory by coming here. Those people that, you come to the beautiful outdoor pitch that I've seen being built on this particular campus outdoor, and you bound in, you've had a good day at work, and you're going to volunteer the next 90 minutes to coach these 12-year-olds, and you come up against this one guy, a parent, and he comes up to you, he's right in your face, and he sucks the living daylights out of you just by saying a couple of words to you, because he's an asshole. And what's that going to do to you? How's that going to portray and play out with these youngsters when you need to be on top of your game for their 90 minutes of their lives, not just yours? There is an actual cost of assholes. It's called the TCA, the total cost of assholes. You can actually see it on the bottom line of Fortune 500 companies. I mean, look at this. Through a poll of 800 managers and employees, Georgetown University identified the effects on the workers who have been on the receiving end of incivility in their workplace. Intentionally spent less time at work. 47% of them, dealing with an asshole, decided to slow down at work. They intentionally decreased their work ethic. Why should I try? This guy's an asshole. He's going to tell me I'm useless. Their work suffered, 66%. Oh God, I've got to go to work again. Lost loyalty to the organization. Why would I work for this organization? It's full of assholes. Lost time avoiding the offender. Oh God, here he comes. Dive into the washroom, do whatever you have to do, hang out at the water cooler. Took their frustration out on the customers. Classic. Classic. No Kaizen, no continual improvement, no evolution when you have these people in the way. But we come up with excuses. So you don't get any Kaizen, you don't get no innovation, because why would anyone who's got an innovative thought want to work with an asshole? He's going to shoot me down. No cooperation, why would you want to cooperate with an asshole? No cohesion, I'm not a team player with this idiot. And finally, are you going to attract the best? Why would I go and work there? They're a bunch of assholes. Have I belabored the point? Have I got it across? Clean the house. Clean the house. You are a performance organization. And I'm not strictly talking about simply the performance of your representative teams or putting people onto the future national teams. I'm talking about doing the best thing, being as effective and efficient. You're not a bottomless pit of resources. So what is the return on time, on money, on the utilization of space? You can measure that stuff, but you're too busy measuring who won the last meaningless game. And even then, you're using the worst possible metrics. Someone scored. You don't even look at how the game was played. Volunteerism is not an excuse for poor performance. I applaud you all being here, particularly those who are volunteers, for giving up your time. And if you're going to deal with children and youth in my book, you have to have a growth mindset. You have to continually want to improve. And anyone that says, I haven't got the time, or they want to take the shortcut and do, I don't know, their FINA A license in like a weekend and a half, then they're not the people you want in your organization. Certification is not a replacement for fundamental knowledge. What does your professional development look like? In fact, in my book, if you're an organization largely of volunteers, they need to actually outperform the professionals. But we let people get away with murder all the time. Are you in or you're not? Do or do not. Simple. This is one of the fundamental reasons why worldwide, all organizations from business to military to sport, only 10% of organizations, or not even at 10%, are sustainable performance cultures. Less than 10%. Most groups actually talk themselves out of performance. They don't stay the course. They deviate. They compromise. And once you make the first compromise, the second one's not too far away. And then all of a sudden, a few months down the road, you're way away from where you said you were going. And here's the thing. Every damn organization has a strategy. I don't give a damn about a glossy document. The issue is, are you living that strategy every single day? The difference between having a mission and showing the world that you are doing your mission every single day. What are your signature processes? So don't boo, don't deride me, otherwise you're a bunch of assholes. Because, and I can show you the one I got from Pochettino, I'm an international member of Tottenham Hotspur, okay? Thank you. So every time my birthday rolls around on the 7th of December, blow me down, I get a card signed by the manager. I don't know how many tens of thousands of supporters worldwide in that particular club there are, but we all get one. Does that make me feel as though I belong even more? You bet your bottom dollar it does. So what do? That's just a little thing to try and show you what the best organizations do. The attention to detail about helping people to belong. You want people to belong to this organization, to belong to this community of Ontario soccer. That's how you're going to make a difference. That's how you're going to keep kids. That's how you're going to bring a kid back year after year after year, because you've made the tribe. You've made them belong. There is a sense of ownership. So you better have good programs, and you better understand the soft skills. I understand there's hundreds of years of technical expertise around the game of soccer in this room. Whoop-de-whoop. All worth naught unless you've captured the imagination of these kids and these youngsters to come back to the next session, to try to the next session, to do the play work at home. And yet, how much time is spent on the soft skills of coaching, communication, setting up the environment in your coaching courses? I bet it's all to do with drills and rules and all this type of stuff. Not dealing with the people side of the equation, and particularly when it comes to children and youth. And are you truly an organization that's actually qualified to teach children and youth? Or is it a one-size-fits-all? Where are your world-leading coaches of 6 to 8-year-olds? Where are your world-leading coaches of girls aged 11 to 15? These are very different challenges. So what are your philosophical underpinnings? What kind of ethical leadership? We have a very fine example here in respect in sport. But what are yours? What do you stand for? What are your values? Have you asked yourself why you coach? Not what you coach, not even how, but the very first thing, why? What's the purpose? Why are you doing this? Ontario Soccer and you, are you truly a trusted source of information? Do people come to you? They treat you like the J.D. Power report for soccer. This is where you go to get an unbiased, apolitical answer to the question I had as a parent of a 15-year-old. Surely that is a metric that you need to aim for, to become that source of information. Doesn't happen overnight. Reputations take a long time to build and are easily destroyed. This aspect, I talked to you this time 2 years ago. 1 in 400 trillion, the probability of being born. That made those guys that won the 60 million last weekend look very easy. 1 in 400 trillion. Well, I'm going to tell you this. 1 in 400 trillion means that you have a very, very, very important responsibility to do the best you can with the lives that you have. You owe it to all the sperm that didn't make it. What is your impact? That's what I'm asking you. You know the old adage where you take up a tailor's measuring tape, a cloth tape, and you put your left thumb on your age right now, whatever the number is. You put your right thumb on what you expect, looking at your family history, your life expectancy will be. And for some of us, the gap's like this. Some of them, like me, it's like this. Well, anything to the left of this thumb, you can't do anything about. That's gone. That time's gone. Anything to the right of this thumb, that's just fantasy. So the only thing you can affect is the here and now on a daily basis, your impact. And it starts with being a lifelong learner and doing the right thing and not being an asshole. So that you stand out from all the others. You become that trusted source. You don't have to know everything. And we're going to get into that now as we look at age appropriateness. People, programs, and places. In that order. Good people. That's what you've got to start off with. That's why education is so important. And then education coupled to appropriate experience. And then a group coming together to elevate. Two are better than one when two act as one. All for one and one for all. The collective. The Borg. For the Star Trekkers amongst us. Parenting 101. What does the information handbook look like for your parenting body? The FAQs. Because I guarantee most of you will answer the same questions over and over again. Can you head those things off? Can you use modern technology such as websites or apps to help people, to on-ramp them into the process? Your kids coming in, they're age 8, and by the way, this whole year is to get them ready to be 9. Not difficult. And the kids who's 9, this whole year of soccer, plus the other stuff that's going on in their lives, which you have no control over, but perhaps be a trusted source or mentor, is to get them ready to be 10. Not to win the World Cup, to be 10. We need this hashtag. Can't blame the parents, because we don't tell them the truth. We don't even tell them that much. We certainly don't tell them what they really need to know. How much is it going to cost? How much time do I have to really spend? Is there any play work or homework? Where can I go to learn more? So become experts in Parenting 101. We all understand this journey. That silhouette, it's a bit gender specific, of course, in this particular one, but that should tell you immediately that through this lifespan, you're not dealing with the same entity. Got little kids, toddlers, stroppy adolescents, and then finally on into adulthood. Why do we all understand that? Why do we all understand you go to school and you go from grade 1 to grade 12? It takes 12 years. Each year builds. The exam, aka competition, doesn't get really serious until 10, 11, 12. For God's sake, in grades 1 through 5, you have cookies, milk, and a nap in the afternoon. Probably some of the grade 12s were like that too. So we understand grade school, how it superimposes on the chronological age. We understand that typically you can see all sorts of models worldwide, all sorts of frameworks. They're basically all the same. The key thing is ask yourself about the content of them. I don't care what they're called. LTAD. ADM, you name it. The Germans a few years ago released a very, very fine document. We didn't need to invent another one. We've got it all there. But probably because it's German, some of us go, oh, us Brits, we go, oh no, can't touch that one. How stupid. You should have an understanding of beg, borrow, steal, get information for wherever you can get it to improve. We go on, different terminologies used by different people. A colleague, a mentor, an influencer on mine, Jean Coté, has this particular sociological message. I think it's very phenomenal, but it's, again, not in isolation. It needs to be imposed on the physiology and the psychology and the biomechanical aspects, because it's a holistic aspect. But at least he started to really get after some of the traits of why children and youth and their parents get involved in sport in the first place. And because he's extended that out into the concept of transformational coaching, really understanding the nuances of coaching, not just the technical side, he's moving forward in leaps and bounds. So if you don't know, Jean Coté is a professor at Queen's University. He was on the IOC consensus statement on what to do around children and youth sport. And then we have the Canadian Sport for Life model, which is more of a generic mass participation with a stream towards possible high-performance sport. But they're all very similar. They're age-appropriate. They understand the evolution of the child. This is really what we're talking about in the first 2 decades. We've got a big red block where we're trying to do some fundamental stuff. Kids are participating. Perhaps they're moving into a recreationally competitive stream. Then as it gets a bit more serious, they're more into performance development. Notice the word development, performance development. I'm not looking at the lag metric of their performance at that moment in time. I'm interested in the lead metrics. Throw them the ball. Show me what you can do with that ball. Forget about anyone else. What can you do with that ball? Because unless you can control the ball in this particular sphere, God help you when I put other people in the way. Or I ask you to play tactically. We forget that stuff. If you can't control the ball. Remember that phrase? I think I spoke about it last time. Whilst it's true that all great jugglers are not great soccer players, all great soccer players are great jugglers. That should send a message home. Control the ball. And then as your brain develops, maybe we can teach you more complex tactical stuff. Canadian Sport for Life. Whoop-de-whoop. Just another model. Pretty solid one. The performance side is that little set of triangles on the side there, in the green, the lighter blue, and then the darker blue, leading up to Train to Win. But the rest is the rest of the Canadian population. The dashboard concept. Remember, what does the dashboard look like for that 12-year-old versus the 14-year-old versus the 16-year-old? What do they need to know? And if you're really thinking about a curriculum in your club or your situation or for Ontario soccer, what do you need to equip your 12-year-olds, roughly speaking, on a bell-shaped curve of capability to get them ready to be 13, and what they need to do for 13 and 14 and 15, just like you'd expect to see in school? Or if you take music with grades, or one set of sports, the combative sports, that do get it right. So do the artistic gymnastic ones as well, actually. Very regimented view, very competency-based. So if you're good enough, they move you. Remember this. This comes from Sir Ken Robinson. A child is only 11 years old once, 12 once, 13 once, 14 once. 365 days to do the right thing. Only you don't actually have 365 days with them, of course. You have a precious few hours over the course of a season. And of course, an 11-year-old is not half a 22-year-old, because life is not linear, even though we like to make it linear. That's just for administrators. It's non-linear, growing with experience. And there are fundamental changes. Why is it that dealing with, say, a 6 or 7-year-old coming once a week, there's always a lag time the next time you see them in picking stuff up? That's because probably until about the age of 8 or 9, children, humans, are poorly equipped to remember what they've previously done. And in particular, to be able to deal with a new situation based on prior experience until the brain has developed. But we don't think that way because we've put the soccer kit on them, they've got a ball, they look like an adult, but just smaller. But they're not simply a small adult. There's 4,380 days to get to be 12 years of age. What does your first 4,380 days look like in soccer? And of course, you're not starting at day 1, so you don't really have 4,380, but maybe 4,000. Get past the first year. But there's an even more important phase. It's the next 2,190 days as we go from 12 years of age to 18, because it's here that you'll start to see the vestiges of where they may go. And by 14, if you've had the youngsters for 3-4 years and you've done a good job, you should start to see the adult form of what they're capable of doing. They won't have the size, they won't have the speed, they won't have the power, but the basic control they will have. And you now need to then harness it appropriately. Do not overcompete them. Do not get into the realm of overuse injuries, that massive pandemic that is killing sports, particularly in the United States of America. And they're trying to do something about that. And when the Americans move, they move. I'm going to show you some examples in a little while. Very scary group. Surely by the end of high school, we want to be able to say this about our youngsters who are still playing soccer. They're active, they're skilled, they're imaginative, they're resourceful, and they are resilient. And you can hang a lot of other phrases on those particular words. But that would be my goal. Those would be a series of lag metrics that I'd be looking for, and you could start to see the lead metrics leading to that outcome. One of the most important being they're actually still playing soccer at 18 years of age, as you hand them on to the next part of their journey. Here's some work from Wojtenko. You want some evidence around why you train kids differently. This is showing what's happening to aerobic power naturally. This is not training, this is what happens to kids. So you can see there's a massive rise in aerobic capability as they come through 13, 14, 15, 16. Well, go figure. This is what's happened to the kid. 12 years of age here, 15 years of age here. Why do you think VO2 max has gone up? Aerobic power. Think of the size of the lung. Think of the muscle mass. Think of the blood volume. All gone up naturally, just by growing. So it's no wonder people will suggest to you the type of training that would be done through those particular phases. Don't have to worry about training the lactate system, which does become important for soccer a little later on. Reason for that, of course, is anaerobic capacity doesn't improve until much later, well past puberty. And in fact, they can't even produce much blood lactate. One, because fiber type has not actually stabilized till after puberty, but more importantly, the actual energy system, for all of you who've done your energy systems in your coaching classes, know that the enzymatic pathways are not fully developed until well past puberty. I'm just trying to promote to you age appropriateness across a number of things: brain function, biomechanics, physiology, and even the social aspects. What motivates those 16-year-olds compared to the 12-year-olds? Vastly different. So in other words, the people interacting with the soft skills need to know what makes a 12-year-old tick compared to a 16-year-old. I won't go into this one. It's just the classic graph of the early versus average versus late maturers, saying that everyone gets to the same point in the end anyway. And one of the problems with this, of course, this is classic Canadian hockey. You pick all the early developers who end up not being that good in the end run, don't make the NHL. Meanwhile, all the other countries come past us, particularly to our neighbors to the south, as we've watched them increase from about 8% to around 28% in the same time period that we've decreased. Environment. Doesn't cost a cent for you to start having a major impact on the environment you create every single day. It's your attitude. It's the enthusiasm you bring. It's the getting rid of the assholes. It's the praise where praise is due. Not to make it too easy. One of the key things is we as the adults need the disciplined approach. Let kids be kids. They're going to muck around. They're children. They're youth. They're going to do silly stuff. All those 16, 17-year-olds will take the risks because the front part of their brain hasn't developed yet. They may be shaving twice a day or whatever, but they're still kids. You just can't see that part. You're not looking inside them. So for the kids, we want a fun approach, and I know all of you roll their eyes, oh my God, what's this guy talking about fun? You need a fun yet challenging approach. Kids want to get better. So you are disciplined to keep them on the straight and narrow, to have some purpose over a period of training sessions, not the single one. You may have to blow a single one off. I don't know, maybe Justin Bieber was playing locally and all the girls are just absolutely doolally that day, so blow that session off. But out of the several hundred you're going to have over the next year and a half, does it really matter? If you keep them on track and keep them coming back? No. But if you're not disciplined enough and you lose it, think of the message that sends. Know what you know what you don't know someone that does. You don't have to know everything. I don't know how many people are registered as administrators, coaches, technical officials, but you're a resource for each other. Add up the years of experience. You can't buy that. It must be thousands of years across Ontario. thousands of years. You should be able to solve any problem if you let yourself, if you work together as one. Time on task has to be a lead metric for you around the youngsters. How much time on the ball? How many ball contacts are they having? And I can assure you, time on task in a game situation, in terms of ball contacts, is not a great return on investment. In terms of understanding free flow play, yes, there's a return on that investment. But you can understand as you deteriorate into relatively poor practice to game ratios, it's not a great developmental return on investment. Hard message. You have adults living vicariously, using children and youth as adult entertainment. The children themselves want to scrimmage. It's just, what does it look like? Does it have to be a 90-minute game once you reach a certain age? Can you be more creative than that? At particular times of the year, does the exam, aka competition, reflect what you were doing in training? School does that all the time. I go and take piano lessons. I do these piano lessons because I'm getting ready for this particular exam, and the exam changes from grade 1 to grade 8. Sport rarely does that. Training versus competition. Don't let anyone tell you that competition isn't important. You just have to understand what it looks like. I get very upset with hockey. So my son, playing a fairly high level of hockey in Alberta, he's 18 years of age. So going through the playoffs, which is identical to the NHL. So managed to get through the first weekend of playoff games, made the second, but then lost. Well, I look at my watch, look at the date. Oh my God, it's like the 2nd of March, and he's no longer playing hockey. Well, I just drove this morning through 30 centimeters of fresh snow in Calgary. I can assure you there's a bloody lot left of winter yet, and he's not playing a winter sport for the next month and a half. So if you follow the classic model of a simple knockout, the very first weekend, 50% of the kids will no longer be playing that sport for the remainder of that competition cycle. That's one thing you should be saying to yourself. How do we keep as many kids playing as long into the season as possible? Which also means that for certain age groups, they don't have to start the season, the senior season, at the same point. Maybe they can start later. And why does everyone rush? Especially if they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age. You've got another 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years left to build the repertoire of experience for them. But everyone's in a mad dash, forgetting that it's their lives, not ours. Do we do anything around decision making? Everyone says we do decision making training. Bullshit. You wouldn't know, I tell you, you wouldn't know decision training if it fell on you. I'm your friend telling you that. Understand what that really looks like and what it means. Or are you creating robots? How can experience of play and scrimmaging come in? How can you work with them to problem solve? Do you realize by you doing this, what do you think that did? You can even get out your little stick men, lay them down. Walk me through what have been a better strategy. Mistakes. Do kids really make mistakes? Or do they just not execute to the level that you had an expectation of? Different way of thinking. Did they make a mistake? If they couldn't do it in the first place, it's not a mistake yet, is it? It's only once they could actually do it and then they blow it that's a mistake. But if they've never done it before, that can't hardly be viewed as a mistake, can it? They're doing what they're doing. So take a Valium and help them move through this. Game theory. Why is it we can go to any computer course, come here, I don't know if Seneca College does computer sci, but you go to any computer sci course on the planet and they'll teach all these kids who wouldn't know football if it fell on them, game theory. And yet we never teach the kids that play the game theory. Not really. I watched some hockey drills before the Olympics. It was like, go stand on the blue line. Well, why? But of course, the kid's never been asked, and never been allowed to ask that question. Well, why do you want me to stand here? Because he's just told to stand there. And sooner or later, perhaps the puck will appear. Not the reason for this. Not understanding if the person that's meant to be in the puck isn't in the right place, what does that actually mean to me? Kind of redundant standing on the blue line. Become students of the sport. True students of the sport. Graduate your kids to become students of soccer. Rules and officiating. I know I leapt ahead. How can you use rules to actually advance development? Surely you want the most constraining set of rules where the game becomes the most difficult to play at the highest level. So you could actually argue that you start off with no rules, and then gradually you start to impose through the age group more rules that constrain the way of play. Think the offside rule, okay? Screw the offside rule. Don't have an offside rule till you're 14, even 15. You'll get the goal hanger, the guy that from the opposing team comes and hangs around. He'll soon learn because the other defense will soon put someone to mark him, and then he won't bother to do that anymore. He doesn't get a good return. And after all, you're trying to get your team to attack that goal. But if you put a whole bunch of rules in place and they're not that good at passing the ball and getting through, then they don't actually impose that. Why not get them all charging to the net? All rushing in. And then when they've got very astute at that, now you say, well, now you can't do that until one of your teammates carries the ball in, or you pump the ball, but you've got to be in front of the defenders and then you can run in. Now you make it a little bit more difficult. Get the idea? But we don't think that way. So for me, officials are very important in actually applying a set of rules that's age appropriate. They're also, the wonderful thing about officials is they can be the first line of talent ID, because they get to see lots of kids across lots of age groups, and you equip them with a scouting report and you train them to become the eyes. Sensible countries would do that. This is from the United States Tennis Association. Kids love to compete, parents love to compare. Well, maybe if you taught Parenting 101, you could at least get them to compare the right type of things, or the interesting things, not simply, my kid won, and then go to the next cocktail party and say, we won that last plastic trophy in the U6 selects, fantastic. This aspect of know what you know what you don't know, this is more just a geographical representation of, you don't all have to do the same thing. You could have clubs in certain regions that are really good in their local area of dealing with everyone up until the age of 12. And then maybe, once they're 12, you actually hand them off to a large organization that deals with the next level up. And then maybe beyond that, there's actually a more centralized one. And the other thing is you can put repositories of people with expertise in each of this, so you can start to have in-reach and outreach type programs, if you're prepared to work together. Yes, you're in competition, but you're only in competition for the greater good of the purpose of Ontario soccer, which is to keep as many people in the game as long as possible and to raise the overall standard on other metrics, multiple dimensions of metrics. If you work together. That's how Ontario needs to be the powerhouse for Canadian soccer. You've got the biggest population, you've got a reasonable climate, you've got a wealth of resource, you should kick the butt of every other segment of the country 10 times over. And not just per capita, outpunch your weight. Twice the per capita return. Why not have that goal? Don't rest on your laurels just because you've got 20 million people living here. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. So understand the difference between lag and lead metrics. Lead ones are the journey. The lag ones are the ones that everyone gets kahunas about. I don't worry about those so much. If you get the lead metrics right, the lag ones will appear. Okay? You have to do a little bit more work than that, but that's where we have it on the podium, to nudge things along, to outpunch our weight. Population of 30 million. Look at Norway. Population of what? 5 or 6. Let's finish with the world outside your door. The ADM, basically Canadian Sport for Life, but the Americans would never ever call it that. The American Development Model. And I don't mind, because that tells you immediately about their attitude. They're not prepared to follow. Ever, 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 ever. The United States Olympic Committee took the ADM from USA Hockey, and they are now putting it in place with all 48 of their national sporting bodies. It's a 5-stage model. Just recently, I've been working with an incredibly storied group in the world of golf, from the PGA, the Masters, the Tour, the Female Tour, and the USOC, to put together a model for golf in the United States. 5 key principles, which when I read it, I thought, and I knew I was coming here, I could stick this to Ontario. This is exactly, fits. Universal access, developmentally appropriate, multi-sport, multi-activity, fun, engaging, challenging, and the golden nugget, quality coaching. Quality coaching. We're our worst enemy at times. We can't get past ourselves. But that's why I'm excited to come back here. I read, I watch the internet, I talk to Johnny, I listen to some of the coaches who send me the odd message every so often. You got a chance here. You really do.